Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Learn How JRebel Accelerates Hybris Development. Before we get started, I have a couple of brief housekeeping announcements. First, today's program will be followed by a live Q&A, so you can just go to the questions tab in your control panel, type it in and submit it, and we'll get to as many as time allows. Secondly, this is being recorded and will be available on demand on the sdtimes.com website starting tomorrow. So if you're in this webinar, you likely know that JRebel is a Java development tool that offers visibility into code changes, eliminating the need to build and redeploy after every change. You may also know that Hybris is a fourth-generation CRM technology suite of solutions now owned by SAP. What you may not know is how well they can work together. Here to explain that is RogueWave Senior Solutions Consultant Curtis Johnson. Take it away, Curtis.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming on here today, hearing a little bit about JRebel and Hybris webinar today. It is a pleasure to be able to meet you and interact with you guys today. But first and foremost, a little bit of an introduction for the two speakers today. First off, my name's Curtis, and I am the Senior Solutions Consultant, as he's previously mentioned, for RogueWave Software. And I have been working here for a little over 6 years now, working and selling and talking about JRebel and the use case and benefits of the tool and how it's really a powerful tool. And I've been working directly with my colleague here today, Martin Jones, who will introduce himself momentarily, and with a lot of the integrations and support that comes alongside for JRebel within Hybris. So Martin, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is Martin Jones. As said, I've been working with Hybris for about 7 years. We are now called SAP Customer Experience, and yeah, it's the same thing. It's the old Hybris underneath. And yeah, we have been working on the JRebel Hybris integration for over a year or longer, and I'm pleased to announce that it's now seamlessly work as you would imagine in the first day. Back to you, Curtis.
Excellent, thank you, Martin. So let's jump right into this. So first off, what we're going to do a little bit of a breakdown of what the agenda is for this webinar. So first off, I'm going to start off talking a little bit of just breaking down what JRebel is, because you might have a general understanding, you might have used it in the past, there might be moments in which you've experienced JRebel, but I want to give you just a good little debriefer of exactly what JRebel is and what its benefits going to be for Java development, and specifically within Hybris. And then we're going to jump into a little bit, Martin will talk a little bit into what Hybris actually is. He will describe what it is, what its benefit, or why people are using it, and go into that briefly with you guys. And then we're gonna do a little bit of a demo. So we're gonna show you a little demo inside of IntelliJ with Martin, and then a demo within an Eclipse. So we'll go through a little bit of what it looks like, how JRebel is working within these environments, and some of the nitty-gritty that goes on behind the scenes. Then at the end, of course, we will have some time to have question and answer, in which we will open it up for everybody here to be able to ask any questions they might have. But feel free throughout to ask the questions, because if you have something that pertains to what we're discussing, we might just jump in and answer it right then and there. So let's jump right on in. First off, let's talk about JRebel. So what is JRebel exactly? So JRebel is a JVM plugin that actually provides developers with the ability to make changes in their applications without ever having to restart the application server, redeploy your application, or do a full build. Now, within Hybris, everyone is using that embedded Tomcat server. That is the default server that is being used whenever you are developing and writing anything in Hybris. Typically, you'll see it set up with within your ant all script that you will run the ant all that will build your whole application and then deploy your application to the server. But you can also, I mean, at its core, you can just be running that ant all script and then go ahead and run the startup script to start up your server as well. But both of these are typically the most large amount of time that is being spent as a developer. And JRebel is going to help eliminate that, making it so that when you make a change in your code, all you have to do is run your ant build, which is going to actually do a specific build of the code that you've modified or changed, and then give you the ability to see that change in your running application. No more needing to have to run the full ant build or ant all script. That typically is where that 10-15 minute restart times are experienced within Hybris. We're going to help eliminate that, giving you the ability to see your changes working right away within your code and in your application. The great thing about JRebel is it does work really in any environment, in any use case, and we will be showing it in two specific use cases today. But we do work really in any scenario that you might be working in. We are always trying to keep up to date with the latest and greatest in the technology. And so whether that means the newest versions of Hybris, the newest versions, Java versions, we're going to do whatever we can to provide you with the ability to support and integrate within all of those environments. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to pass it over to Martin, who's going to talk a little bit about Hybris, and then we'll jump into the first demo. Martin? Martin, are you?
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, Hybris, since you have already turned up here, you know that Hybris is e-commerce platform. You also probably know that Hybris is assembled with many extensions. Some of them is core platform extensions, and some of them are your own custom extensions, which you need to build into order to customize your project. Hybris is usually compiled by Ant, where the most typical use case is ant all, which compiles all modules in the right order. This is kind of important in context of JRebel. We can also compile just a single module with ant build command. This will speed up the compilation process to just one module. In order to use JRebel with Hybris, you need to compile the extensions in the right order in order to reflect all the changes in your environment. I'm going to jump into the live demo, if I can. Let me share my screen. Okay, so now we are seeing Hybris standard B2C accelerator, which I've generated through Ant module gen in Ant script, and it generates the complete set of training web store. There is nothing else. You can see the standard extensions in the local extension info. After you have compiled, we have been working with JRebel guys to make the integration seamless. Into IntelliJ, you need to import not only JRebel extension, you also need to install Hybris integration extension, which does all the magic with importing the project. Next step you need to do is in your local properties to add the integration bits, which tells Hybris how to use JRebel. We will share the couple of lines with you later on. Once you have done that, you need to run unserver to reflect these local properties changes into Tomcat configuration. So I've got my demo up and running. So let's see what happens if I go to product page. I've deliberately made an error there, so no surprises. I'm going to see what it is. It's a null pointer exception. I'm going to IntelliJ. I open the file at the line 133. Yep, that would be a bug. So I'll fix it quickly. And I rebuild the whole product using native IntelliJ build. IntelliJ uses the build in a way that you bypass completely AND, and it compiles only the classes which have changed. This makes the whole compilation of Hybris quite quickly. As you can see, it took 10 seconds to compile everything. When I say everything, I mean everything is changed. In this case, only Java class. If you would be to change items XML, for example, it would also generate modules jar. And if you were to change, I don't know, JavaScript, it would trigger grunt as well. So it compiles the project in Hybris context, whatever is needed in Hybris. So I've changed the class, and I can see that JRebel already reloaded the class into running Tomcat. So all I need to do is to refresh the page. And my product landing page now works as it should. JRebel works with pretty much all extensions, all types of extensions of Hybris, including back office. In the past, we had trouble with multiple class loaders of Hybris. JRebel now detects them automatically, seamlessly. You don't need to configure them anywhere anymore. So it's all good. What we have done also is to ease up implementation of integration tests. We have recognized that integration tests are really important to project success, and yet there was quite limited number of projects which would actually utilize them. The reason being is that it took a long time to develop them and test them. Ordinarily, you would, if you were to execute integration test, the whole Hybris project would have to start up, then your integration test would run, and then it would turn down. That process takes time. Depending on the project size, it could be anything on average 15 minutes, which is a long time to test and find out you have made a mistake in your integration test. You need to fix it and run again. So we have answered the need by executing the integration test on running instance. So in that way, you can bypass the need for starting it up and tearing it down and just execute the class. If you need to make changes, JRebel is here to help, and it will seamlessly exchange the changed classes as you go. So let's try executing one test. For execution on remote server, we have created a new template running configuration, which is called Hybris remote tests. You can filter whether you want to use unit test or integration tests only. Or you have further configurations. I've already prepared mine with the proper scope, which will execute just this one class. So I'm going to execute it and see what happens. Every time I execute IntelliJ will compile the project, it will just try to compile the changed classes. So nothing really changed here. So the whole process took 7 seconds. Let's see what's going on in Hybris. I can see the tests were attempted, one failed. The same results I get in IntelliJ. This test didn't go well. Okay, that is another my coding issues. So I'll fix that and build a project. JRebel should pick up this change immediately. Yep, that was quick. And I'm going to execute the test again. Okay, and we can see the test was successful, the same says IntelliJ. You may ask what happens if you need to debug the code and to find out where the problem is, in case it's not like throwing new pointer exceptions. You can debug the code, and we have remote debug configuration for it. So you, in order to use debug, you need to execute Hybris with command Hybris server and parameter debug afterwards. So I'm going to execute the integration test again for the last time, I promise. And this should give us the opportunity to see the breakpoint. Yeah, there we are. I can see the variable is 2, and you can debug normally as you would used to. Okay, that would be it from my side. Back to you, Curtis.
So I'm curious, Martin, you were talking a little bit about the build, being able to run that build. So are any Hybris developers that are using IntelliJ able to use that build? What is that build project when they're using JRebel? Is that exactly how that would be set up?
Yeah, IntelliJ itself cannot handle a Hybris project very well. For that reason, we have developed a Hybris integration plugin, which takes care of the, let's say, unusualities of Hybris build process. Especially there is a lot of magic going on around add-on concept, and also around custom logic, which is building models like items XML or beans XML. It pretty much does the same functionality as Ant does. It just does it within a context of compilation cache, which Ant doesn't have, and this makes it really fast.
So is it doing it more on an incremental level? Is that more that it's only making the changes to the specific files that are being modified? Is that what's happening there?
That's exactly right. Each file, when it's changed, is marked as dirty, and we process only dirty files. For each file type, there is a different compiler type, which picks up the dirty files. That's how we separated the items XML compilation from Java. So not every compiler is executed all the time.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, thank you. I'm going to jump back here. So I have it set up in my Eclipse environment. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit of a mess in Eclipse, which is kind of expected. I worked with a number of people with Eclipse environments that are using Hybris, and this is actually not far off from what I usually am seeing when I'm working with people working inside of Eclipse, which I feel is a little bit difficult when it comes to being a Hybris developer and having all of these errors and really not having much you can do about half of them or any of them, and just having to just work around it. But what we're going to be able to do is I'll show you a lot of the things that JRebel can do right here within this environment to really speed it up and make it a little bit more efficient for you as a developer working in these Hybris-based applications. Now, I similarly have the Hybris environment set up in here. As well, I installed our JRebel plugin. Now, there is a plugin that's available directly inside of IntelliJ, but also as well inside of Eclipse that will basically guide you through the basic steps of setting JRebel up within your application. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that right now. Now, JRebel, first and foremost, will provide you with this view that you can be able to walk through the configuration steps to get JRebel working. We have licensing. You can be able to download and install our JRebel license options whenever directly from JRebel.com, in which you would be able to get your own active license to be able to test JRebel out in your application for free. But you can actually designate here the amount of time that you typically are spending waiting for that ant all script or the ant build and then your server startup scripts. We typically see from most reportings that we've seen from discussing with Hybris clients, it's 5 to 10 minutes, and they'll designate that right here. And this will give you a little bit of an understanding of just how much time you'll save while using JRebel. Breaking down the amount of redeploys you've saved while using the tool, which obviously is a great way to understand the benefit our tool is offering. Now, the actual setup of JRebel within Hybris is pretty basic. Martin touched on it briefly, and I'm just going to go into a little bit more depth of exactly what's happening. What we are doing is we are adding a file directly into your JVM argument, sorry, this agent path argument that's going to be added directly into the startup script for your Tomcat server. Now, the way Hybris works is the best way to do that is by adding it into the local.properties file. That local properties file would be able to designate, and you saw from Martin's demonstration, he was able to show you exactly where in that properties file you would be able to see JRebel added directly into that local.properties file. Now, we will be able to directly work with really any scenarios that you might be using. Now, there's an interesting aspect that comes into play with this, and that actually directly applies to what Martin previously shown, and that is the fact that it also has a specific integration for your, I'm sorry, whoa. It has specific integration that's created to work for your debugging. Often you're going to be debugging your applications, needing to be able to use JRebel while debugging the application. You can be able to add this in, and there are 2 separate arguments you need to use. One would be going directly into the local properties defined under the Java options. And then the other would be going directly into there defined under the debug Java options. So that would enable you when running your application through debug mode to be able to, once again, be able to use JRebel to be able to give you insight into the application's performance or changes that you're making in your code. Now, the second aspect that needs to be done in order to get JRebel to work in your application is actually adding it into your application. Now, the great thing about this is you're not needing to do this 99% of the time, because Hybris is run, is an exploded application. And JRebel actually has the means to be able to read and understand your application without actually needing any of these configuration files. So the way JRebel actually works is that it is actually, in a way, it is a remapping tool. And what it's actually doing is it's remapping the classes that are being read by your application and mapping them to the location designated in, or basically where they're being modified through your Ant build scripts or your compilers, where your compilers are being made. The great thing about Exploded when you're using Hybris is that is already designated through the JVM. So we are able to use that information to catch and recognize modifications being made as you're making the changes, and then displaying those right there in your code. Now, what I have here, I have this similar environment and pretty similar stuff that I've got here in my application and in my code. And what I want to do, yeah. So I actually, let me see here. So I'm on my page. I make sure this is up and running here fully here. Yeah, it's good. So we've got our application, and here I have this page, and it looks great, wonderful. So what I'm going to do is actually add what Martin just took out into my code back, so that we can get the error. And so then if I refresh the page, so then I made this change. So first off, you saw I just made this change. What I have to do in order for this change to be displayed is I need to run my Ant build. So here you can see I have my Ant build script right here. I can go ahead and just click that and let that run. Now, the reason I have to do this is because of all of the errors popping up inside of Eclipse. Now, if I were to go ahead and solve every one of these errors that are occurring inside of Eclipse, I could actually use the incremental build automatically option that is available directly inside of Eclipse. But because of all of these errors that pop up in Eclipse, and as I said, some people experience this more than others. I work with clients who have no errors popping up here, and they have completely, configured their entire environment inside of Eclipse, and it's perfect. But I wanted to show it this way just because I know that there's a lot of people that are experiencing this, and this is a really real scenario that we're displaying here, and what happens for a lot of developers that are using Hybris inside of Eclipse. And so I'm trying to make this as realistic for their environments as I can. So when you have this type of a scenario, you need to run that Ant build. The Ant build is going to go ahead and update all of the specific files that you've made changes to, and update those extensions similar to what as Martin was explaining previously. And that will take a minute. But as that is happening, you'll be able to see eventually the changes are going to get displayed through the Hybris console, showing you that we're up and running and that the changes are being made properly in the right code. And so there you go. You can start to see that popping up. Reloading the class. Now, there's a couple of things that's occurring here. First off, you can see that the project page controller, which is the file that I actually modified, is getting reflected. But you're also seeing that there's another class that's getting modified as well, which is this delivery address checkout step controller. And so that actually gets updated. You're also seeing it getting reinitialized with the modification as well. so that when you do make calls to these, you're going to be able to see all of these changes get made in each of the files that you're modifying within your code. As you can obviously see, Hybris just takes a little bit longer than most, and the value proposition that JRebel provides within this is considerable, especially when you consider having to do the full and all scripts and restarting up your entire server in order to see this change. JRebel is pretty obvious of pretty clearly a benefit for your applications in your environment. And there we go. That took a lot longer than it normally does. Usually it takes about a minute. I don't know why that round took so much longer, but we are a go, hopefully. There we go. And so there I'm able to make my change. You're able to see the change right there in my application. And you're able to do that pretty seamlessly. One of the things that we have seen is, well, because of the plugin that Martin has created, it really makes IntelliJ a very viable use case for a lot of developers that are working in Hybris. Because of that, this time that is still being spent running this AMP build. But still, the time that you're wasting normally would still be about 2 or 3 times that amount of time, proving to be the reason for JRebel's overall benefit. So what I want to do now, I can actually make other changes directly into here. So JRebel works beyond just Java files. You're able to modify and create JSP changes within your code, and you're able to see those get reflected as well. I can make changes to my properties. So if I go ahead and let's just say this error sucks. And then if I go into my properties, let's just change something else in here. Let's just change it to say country for everyone. Sure, let's do that. And so I just made a couple changes here. Now, when I run that, I will be able to see all of these changes that I just made in my code displayed in my application. Now, JRebel, the great thing about JRebel is it works beyond just the Java files changes that you're making. You can make modifications to XML files, JSPs, properties, whatever file you might be wanting to modify or change, JavaScript files. You're going to be able to see those get reflected right there in your code without having to run or stop the server or redeploy your application. Now, one thing I do like to note, and one thing you should have maybe you noticed when I made that initial change, was that I actually was able to show this change without actually leaving the page that I was on. So we are actually going to help maintain state of your applications, providing you with the ability to not only make changes in your code, but actually stay at the point in which you're making those changes in your code and get those reflected directly into your application and in your environments. Now, build is still occurring. And I just realized that my changes aren't going to both be shown because, oh, well, maybe I can make it happen. I think I could do this. Because it's in 2 different locations. We both, just so you guys have a little understanding, we both were showing it inside of Mac computer, but JRebel works really in any environment. You could be using PC, Linux, that doesn't matter. The only thing that will impact is the way in which you're actually adding JRebel into your applications. So instead of the argument that you would be using would be slightly different in order to make sure that it's getting read properly. Getting there. So that is, and so the last things that I was going to be talking about a little bit was that that JRebel also will work within class files that you're modifying and changing in your code, giving you the ability to modify and change specific class files that are being modified in your code. Whether you're adding new classes or creating or modifying existing classes, we'll also be able to work within the frameworks that you're working in. So within Hybris, Hybris is mainly focused around ZK, Spring, and I think there's some other frameworks in there too. Martin, you can add if there's anything else that I'm forgetting. But JRebel has specific integrations for each of these frameworks that Hybris is built around, and we'll be able to reflect changes made directly to those frameworks that are being used.
I think for Hybris, it's really important Spring integration you can mention.
I'm sorry, what?
Spring integration.
Yes. So yeah, Spring is a big part of our integration support. We actually, so the way that we work within these different, and so you can see the first change here. And then I'll go to another page to see if I can get this other change to show. Go to checkout. There we go. And you can see country for everyone. And so I'm able to make these types of changes. Now, within the framework, within Spring, obviously Spring is the core. This is a highly MVC setup applications. And so Spring is critical, being able to make changes to those Spring configurations is critical. And JRebel works within that seamlessly, whether you're modifying XMLs or modifying annotations being used within within your Java code directly. And so we are going to eliminate any of the pain that you would be experiencing having to do any kind of restarts for these types of changes and modifications that you're making in your code. So this is a good spot for me to go ahead and open up for questions. So Martin and I here to answer anybody's questions. If you have a question, feel free to put them directly into the questions tab. We can be able to address those questions for you right here on the call. Give you guys a minute to be able to enter in some questions as you guys are thinking of. You're also, I don't know if you can just ask it. I don't think you just go ahead and put in the questions chat. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only way to do that. Very nice presentation, gentlemen. We do have a couple of questions that have come in already, and I just will throw them out to you. The first one is it necessary to use Eclipse or IntelliJ with what you've been describing?
No, it's not. However, I can't really imagine you would code Hybris project in command line or a simple text file. There are other IDEs like NetBeans you can use. No problem at all. JRebel has integration to all of them. However, Hybris integration doesn't have the plugin for them, so the incremental build will not work. So you would have to use unbuild.
Very good. All right. Okay, the next question looks like this. What if my team is not using Hybris exclusively? Will JRebel work for the entire application?
Yeah, so I can kind of address that one. So yeah, absolutely. So while we are focused here on Hybris, JRebel actually does work with really any type of Java-based applications. So I guess that would be the big caveat, as is what else are you actually developing or writing? If you are writing applications that are Java-specific, then absolutely JRebel will be able to support and integrate within those. We actually support all the major application servers, IDEs, and frameworks. So whether you're using WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, Glassfish, Jetty, JRebel will support and integrate within those environments and enable you to make changes in those without having to restart your applications. And so if you are working, now obviously if you're working in other languages other than JVM-based languages, and so that doesn't necessarily is not exclusively just Java, but it does mean JVM-based languages. So anything that compiles into Java class files. So that would include Java, but also extend off into Groovy and Scala. We do have the ability to support as well.
Very good. Okay, so another question has come in, and that is, in IntelliJ, wouldn't it be easier just to compile changed class rather than doing the whole project build? Is there any benefit of doing the whole project build?
Well, IntelliJ already does that. We compile only the changed classes. And no, there isn't really real benefit to compile the whole project. There is no need for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that was something that you had mentioned earlier about not having to compile the entire project.
Yeah, and so the great thing about how JRebel is working is that it remaps everything. So it takes all of the classes. Typically, when you deploy your application to your server, it takes a deployment directory and it holds all those files and looks at those files in that location. And so we're just basically saying, hey, instead we're going to remap all of this so that whenever any individual change happens, we can see that. So you don't have to actually modify your whole, you don't have to do that full build in order to see a change get reflected. You can actually, JRebel will look and just find the specific modifications or changes that are being made in your code and then push that to your Hybris environment.
Excellent. Okay, so the next question is actually two parts, and it says, how much time would I save in the whole project development doing this, and how are you able to track the time savings?
Yeah, it's a good question. So let me actually, I still have this, right? So I'll share my screen one more time here. Now, what, can you repeat the question one more time? Just
sure. The question was, how much time do I save in the whole project development, I guess using these solutions, and how are you able to keep track of the time savings for JRebel?
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, the whole time, the time savings would be able to get tracked directly through our configuration. And so this is actually inside of IntelliJ as well. You would be able to keep track of and see the amount of times that are being saved. Now, what we're doing is we're basically, whenever there would have been a redeploy required, JRebel will basically keep a note of that. And each time that there is a redeploy, so as you can see for me over the last 30 days, I've got 44 redeploys that I would have done. And so I've saved approximately 2.5 hours of time in the last month. And so depending obviously on your application, the amount of changes in the code that you're working in and modifications you're making will display the amount of benefit that JRebel is going to provide for your application and for your environment.
Excellent. All right, so it looks like we've gone through the questions. I would remind people, if you still want to ask them, you can, and we can answer them offline after the webinar ends. But I would like to throw it back to you, Curtis and Martin, for maybe another quick 30-second wrap-up of what people should have as their greatest takeaway from today's presentation. And why don't we start with you, Curtis?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing that I would say when it comes to our tool for JRebel specifically is to really that the pain, one of the largest pains that I've seen talking to Hybris developers over the last several years is the amount of time that you're spending restarting your Hybris applications. And JRebel really is just here to help make that an easier, more seamless process. We are always working at developing and creating new technology to help improve your developer life, because we're all we have a bunch of great developers here within the Rogue Wave team that are focused on making developers develop better. We're all about creating better applications, better environments, and JRebel is a critical aspect to that for any of your Hybris applications.
That's great. Martin, any final thoughts for our attendees?
Yes, I would concur with Curtis. We have worked really hard to make your life easier. I should mention that the Hybris integration plugin works in Community Edition in IntelliJ, so you don't actually have to spend money on IntelliJ. That's often asked question. So you can really use JRebel with the free IntelliJ and develop faster. Last plea I would make is, guys, do use integration and unit tests, please.
Excellent. All right, well, gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much. Curtis Johnson, Senior Solutions Consultant at Rogue Wave, and Martin Jones, Senior Hybris Consultant at SAP, for a very deep presentation. I'd certainly like to thank Rogue Wave, which is the sponsor of today's session, and of course all of our attendees for hanging in there with us. So until next time, I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times. So long for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.